guys, happy Monday. It's me. So I was calculating the rest of the chapters in the book, Charlotte's Web, and I really want to finish before school ends. So I have to read a chapter a day to you guys. So we're on chapter 11. So we are halfway through. So let's finish this book and find out what happened. Today's chapter is called The Miracle. The next day was foggy. Everything on the farm was dripping wet. The grass looked like a magic carpet. The asparagus patch looked like a silver forest. On foggy morning, Charlotte's Web was truly a thing of beauty. This morning, each thin strand was decorated with dozens of tiny beads of water. The web glistened in the light and made a pattern of love lines and mystery like a delicate veil. Even Lurvy, who wasn't particularly interested in beauty, noticed the web when he came to feed the pig for breakfast. He noted how clearly it showed up, and he noted how big and carefully built it was. And then he took another look and saw something that made him set his pail down. There, in the center of the web, was a neatly woven in block letters was a message. It said, "Some pig." Lurvy felt weak. He brushed his hands against his eyes and stared harder at Charlotte's web. Can you imagine if you saw a web like this and in the middle it said "some pig"? What would you think? "I'm seeing things," he said. He dropped to his knees and said a short prayer. Then, forgetting all about Wilbur's breakfast, he walked back to the house and called Mr. Zuckerman. "I think you better come down to the pig pen," he said. "What's the trouble?" said Mr. Zuckerman. "Anything wrong with the pig?" "Not exactly," said Lurvy. "Come and see for yourself." The two men walked silently down to Wilbur's yard, Lurvy pointing to the spider web. "Do you see what I see?" Zuckerman stared at the writing in the web. He murmured the words, "Some pig?" Then he looked at Lurvy. Then they both began to tremble. Charlotte, sleepy after her night's excursion, smiled as she watched. Wilbur came and stood directly under the web. "Some pig?" Lurvy said. "Some pig," whispered Mr. Zuckerman. They stared and stared for a long time at Wilbur. Then they stared at Charlotte. "You don't suppose that spider—" began Mr. Zuckerman, but he shook his head and didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he walked back to the house and spoke to his wife. "Edith, something has happened," he said. He went into the living room and sat down, and Mrs. Zuckerman followed. "I've got something to tell you, Edith," he said. "You better sit down." Mrs. Zuckerman sank into her chair. She looked pale and frightened. "Edith," he said, trying to keep his voice steadily, I think you had best be told that we have a very unusual pig." A lot of complete bewilderment came over Mrs. Zuckerman's face. "Homer Zuckerman, what in the world are you talking about?" "This is a very serious thing," he replied. "Our pig is completely out of the ordinary." "What's unusual about the pig?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman as she began to recover from her scare. "Well, I don't really know yet," said Mr. Zuckerman, "but we just received a sign, Edith, a mysterious sign. A miracle has happened on the farm. There's a large spider web in the doorway of the barn right over the pig pen. When Lurvy went to go feed the pig this morning, he noticed the web was foggy, and he saw in the spider's web what looks like some words that say 'some pig.' The words were woven right into the web. They were actually part of the web, Edith. I know because I've been down there and I've seen them. It says 'some pig.' There can be no mistake about it. A miracle has happened and a sign has occurred here on earth, right in our barn. We have no ordinary pig." "Well," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "it seems to me you're a little off. It seems to me we have no ordinary spider." No, said Zuckerman. "It's the pig that's unusual. It says so right there in the middle of the web." "Maybe so," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Just the same, I intended to have a look at that spider." "It's just a common gray spider," said Zuckerman. They got up together and they walked down to the yard. "You see, Edith, it's just a common gray spider." Wilbur was pleased to receive so much attention. Lurvy was still standing there, and Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman, all three, stood for about an hour reading those words over and over and watching Wilbur. Charlotte was delighted with the way her her trick was working. She sat without moving a muscle and just listening to the conversation. After a while, the fog lifted, the web dried off, and the words didn't show up so plainly. The Zuckermans and Lurvy walked back to the house just before they left the pig bin. Mr. Zuckerman took one last look at Wilbur. "You know," he said in an important voice, "I thought all along that you were extra good. He's a solid pig. That pig is as solid as they come." "You notice how solid he is around the shoulders, Lurvy?" Sure I do," said Lurvy. "I've noticed everything about that pig. He's quite a pig. He's long and he's smooth." "That's right," agreed Lurvy. "He's smooth as they come." So what was the miracle? Charlotte has something happening to help Wilbur. We'll find out tomorrow. Tomorrow's chapter is called A Meeting. Bye, guys. Have a good Monday.